So, so in all honesty, this is my first year trying this. It just seemed like a good idea. Um, so I've been doing the OTS queen rearing for a while, and I thought, hey, I want comb honey. So I kind of combined the OTS method and the comb honey method, kind of merged the two. So whatever day it was on that spreadsheet, I pulled the queens out of my colonies so that they'd get made at after the summer solstice, which what's Mel's last name that came up with OTS? Starts with a D. He spoke at the Iowa Honey Producers Association meeting a couple of years ago. Anyway, he had his belief was that queens made after the summer solstice don't ramp down in the fall like younger or older queens do. So that was kind of my reason for picking that date, and I was hoping that the honey flow would kind of hit where it did last year, so that I could capitalize on honey while they were rearing that new queen, so they could concentrate on raising honey instead of baby bees the last 2 weeks. And really, the way I haven't looked in one set of colonies, but it hasn't really worked out that way for me. My big honey flow hasn't really hit here yet. But anyway, so what I did, I pulled the queens out. My thought is I will treat them. Actually, I'm going to treat them on Sunday with an oxalic acid dribble, because there'll be absolutely no brood in those colonies. So that's kind of the main point, was to have that brood break and get them treated for mites, and hopefully get some honey out of it, although I'm not sure it's going to work out that way.
Do you want me to share my screen so we can look at the
Sure.
spreadsheet you sent me?
So in the spreadsheet, a lot of it was, or the far right column is my notes, just to help me organize and make sure I take the right equipment with me out. And I fell short of what I was or the maximum possibilities of it, as far as getting getting a lot of frames in what I was calling the builder colony. So basically, when I went through my hives, so 4 days before I removed the queen, I took took one of the deep saw and really packed them down. So I run 2 deeps with 8 frames and a feeder in each one. So I've got 16 brood frames, and I condensed them down to 9 brood frames. And most of my colonies had exactly 9 frames of brood. So I didn't really have very many extra frames for what I was calling the builder colonies, which was just going to be a tower of all those extra brood boxes that I took off the parent colonies. So then on Monday, I removed the queens, which actually went really well. I found the queen on the second or third frame on probably 2/3 of the hives. And I couldn't believe the number of queen cells I knocked down at day 8 and day 12. So they definitely, and I just got back from checking one of the yards that I put mating nukes out in, and I had 80% success. So 8 out of the 10 of those mating nukes had queens in that were laying. Although I did have one. If we've got time at the end, I've got some pictures I hope sync to my iPad that I can share, that I've got a question for you and Judy, and see what you guys think of it. But that's kind of away from this. But so hopefully, and so I got this calendar. It's kind of a hybrid of, if you go online, I'm trying to think what group had it. There's the queen rearing calendar if you're doing grafting. And I've got a similar spreadsheet for OTS that I merged with that calendar. And this is kind of a third calendar that I merged with my other calendar, just to lay out my days, to know when my mite treatment is, and when to go check things. Any questions? And so last year my mite counts were really high in June. This year, most of these colonies were still at 1 or 0. So I'd already committed to doing it. So I'm not sure I'm really going to even see the wow, it really knocked down the mites like I was counting on.
So the main idea is that part of it is that whenever you're producing new queens, but at the same time leaving colonies broodless, so that you're able to treat those broodless colonies with something like oxalic acid dribble, and it'll be extra effective.
Exactly.
There's no brood. But then at the same time, you've removed the queens and you're rearing new queens.
Yes, yeah. So the pure Killian method. I don't know how many people are familiar with the Killian method. It's old. I mean, the book I found it in is probably published 30 years ago at least. But the whole idea of that is to condense those colonies down, make them on the verge of wanting to swarm, remove the queen, and then and really it's for cut comb production. That the Killian method is more geared at cut comb production. But at day 12, they either add a queen cell or a new queen. Well, I'm OTS, I've got the queen cells from the bees anyway. I'm just using that queen cell from instead of knocking it down. Being the frugal beekeeper I am.
Yeah, saving a lot of money in purchasing queens, and also hopefully getting stock that is better, is more fit for the Iowa or Nebraska, this Midwest landscape that I think is pretty tough for the California bees that we get.
Right. Well, and in all honesty, so these are I did this to the colonies with all my surviving queens, but they were all in California this year. So
I mean, but they're still mating with hopefully maybe some local stock and.
Right. Yeah. Well, probably not, because Ebert has a big yard just down the road from me. So we're probably mating with California commercial queen or commercial hives anyway. But
was you saving money at least?
Yeah. But yeah, these are, so I sent bees to California. I still had 50% loss. And I attribute my losses last year to the high mite loads. I fought all last year in July, August, September to get the mite loads down. And I got them down, but I think it was too late. So that's why I'm trying to be more vigilant this year. And Wednesday, I put formic acid on 16 hives also.
You might have gotten them down, but it was high all over.
What, Judy? Can you repeat that?
Oh, I was saying Andy might have gotten control of his mite loads, but I think because, there was high mite loads everywhere, they could have easily gotten reinfected by everything else.
Right. And I think by the time I got them down, they were already damaged. I'm not even blaming anybody else. I think it took me so long that by the time I had them down, they were in rough shape.
And we talked about before, like if there's a good overwintering success year, then you've got a higher mite load population to start than you would anticipate. So that those mite populations almost get out of hand really, really quickly on those good overwintering years. Yeah. And it's hard to get a handle on. And then you have a big kill and you have really big overwintering losses. You have to replenish with packages, and then you start off with the mites pretty low again, and then you have good success overwintering.
That's where I'm at right now. We just did mite checks, and we didn't find any. We sampled a quarter of our hives, and we didn't find any. Yeah. Which I'm okay. I feel like that's a pretty good. Well, of course, we'll be sampling again next month. It tends to get pretty bad, July, August. But since most of our hives this year came from packages, we're pretty low. right now. But Judy, it sounds like all
Did
your-
you dribble your packages before they were 10 days past the queen laying?
No.
Oxyolic.
But I talked to the supplier and they told me everything that they had done right before shaking the packages. And so I trusted, I took them at their word. And it seems that since we have such low mite levels, I think that, yeah, whatever they did worked.
Right. That's the, I'm sorry, Judy, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I mean, the mite loads are also probably quite low too, because your colonies are probably full of sealed brood. You know, like this colony had a mite load of 3, but if you broke in between the colonies, you could see like 10 mites right in that little small cluster of brood. So it's hard to say in midsummer when there's tons of sealed brood. The sugar roll still shows pretty low mite counts, but you can clearly see there's quite a lot of mites in there.
Right. That's the yard I treated with formic acid last week. I had one mite count of 13. That's been my highest one out of, I think everything else has been 3 or less. But the one that had 13, when I broke it open, I had just about like that picture. So the weather was perfect, so I put formic acid on them.
So talking about phoretic mites versus mites in the brood, I got to see Dr. Katie Lee from University of Minnesota give a talk yesterday, and she was talking about her research looking at, why do we get a cup of 300 bees, a half cup of 300 bees in order to check for mites? And she delved into the research behind that, and some of the research that she had done was getting adult bees to check for mites and comparing that to actually uncapping the brood and pulling out 100, 300 larvae or whatever in each hive to check for mites. And it seemed that their annual average was about 48% of the total mites in the hive were on the backs of adult bees. And then the rest were in the larvae, which I found really interesting, because I would have thought that way fewer mites would be found on the backs of the adult, would be phoretic on the back of the adult bees. So I that was one fact that I didn't know that I found really interesting. But then again, there's all these other factors you have to take into account: what time of year it is, how much capped brood there is, all those things. So it's a lot of considerations at the same time.
We like to do this thing where we show a picture of some bees and we ask the new beekeepers if they see any mites, if they would treat, and they'll say, oh no, we don't see any mites. We don't see any mites on there. We don't have any problems. And it's like, well, do you want to bet $150 on that? Because that's really what they're essentially saying is, well, I don't see any, so I must be okay. But you're really gambling there, because it's not about what you can see. It's about those other mites that are in the sealed brood,
If you see mites on bees, you're already too late.
True.
I have a cool video. Do you want to see?
Yeah.
So this was in one of, we did do a queen breeding class, but this was not part of it. But we did see this cool video. I wonder, I am not sharing it, am I? I'm just playing it.
You're sharing.
Oh, I am sharing?
Yeah. We can see your videos and.
Well, what did I just do? Because now I don't know where it is. All right, let me pull it back up. Downloads. I just closed the video, sorry. There we go.
Oh, while we have a second, Luke, do you have a link to? I got an email this week from someone who can't make it that was interested in having a link to the videos. So if they can't make it the day of happy hour, then maybe they could watch them later. Could you share that link in the chat? Or
I'll go ahead and share it in the chat. I think we have yet to I'd have to double check, upload the last one, just because we've been so busy. But yeah, we have them on our YouTube channel, but I'll go ahead and share the link in the chat.
Okay. Thanks.
Are you seeing the video?
Yes, we are seeing
Okay.
the video.
Do you guys know what this is? I'll play it again. Here's another. At the very beginning, we got this thing right here. What's that? Oh, you can't see my arrow. Can you see my arrow?
Yeah, we can see your
Yeah.
arrow.
I just say that looks like a queen crawling on a queen cell. I didn't see her come out of there. Or is she attacking a rival queen cell?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You don't really get to see this very often. So we just basically sat there and watched her go through and destroy all these queen cells. Here's one queen cell. She emerged out of here and then started moving around and then started stinging and chewing this one out and working her way through the frame, killing all the sister queen cells.
Cool.
She was wandering around for a while in this observation hive before she got busy on the queen cells, but it was really cool to watch. She was like aggressive.
Which was it? What observation hive was this?
We had a queen rearing class over the weekend, and it was Saturday, and we found a virgin queen with a bunch of queen cells, and we just wanted to move her into a mating nuke later. So we put her into an observation hive because we had an event on Sunday, pollinator week. It's like an event every day. So we had this event on Sunday and just sat there and watched her chew out all these queen cells. So if you can't find the queen, I'll point her out. She's right here. The virgins look very small. I mean, they're hard to tell. They're a
Mhm.
little bit they're shorter in the abdomen, but one thing that's really kind of interesting is even at a very young age, they don't have a lot of hair on that thorax area. So they seem odd in their shape and their movement, but they do appear to move a little bit more like a worker.
Cool.
Yeah. We saw lots of queens and virgins. It was a fun class. Basically, we're trying to do this locally adapted stock, right? We've been kind of asking people and kind of testing for interest in terms of how many queen breeders there are, how many people there are that we could actually start doing queen exchanges and programs like that. Come to find, our area is just kind of, we really do not have a lot of people who breed bees or who supply large amounts of bees. And then we have a lot of newer beekeepers or beekeepers that have always done honey production and might not really understand the queen rearing process. And honestly, some of them are kind of like, well, I don't really understand it. It must be really complicated. And it's a lot easier than you think. You know, queen rearing and queen breeding are two different things. Like what Andy was saying is that there's an ability there to replace queens in your own operation to keep things going money savings wise, and even slowly incorporate kind of genetic diversity into your operation, you know? So I think before we can do locally adapted queens and programs, we got to get our community to just be comfortable rearing queens. So that's what we were doing, was just a quick down and dirty, no lectures class where we we had people spend the whole day just prepping starter boxes, building cell builders, and then grafting. And it was a fun class. It was, yeah.
It was just a 1-day class?
Yeah, I can pull some photos up if I can do this correctly. Let me start there. It was a fun class. It was I don't know, Luke, Luke is new to this, so maybe you can share your perspective on the queen rearing class.
Yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun. Judy, I thought you explained it really well. Whereas, for, like there's a lot of material for people to read out there, but just, what people really need is the hands-on experience. And so we just focused the class on the hands-on experience. And I had a lot of fun with it. We to kind of prep things, me and Judy and some of the other B Lab people, we went ahead and grafted some frames for the queen rearing class in advance. And then during the workshop, it was kind of fun to just help people with their technique so that they were doing a little bit better as far as learning how to graft the larva to the queen cups. And I really enjoyed that. I thought it was a lot of fun. And everybody who attended was just very, very engaged. And I think everybody gave us good feedback.
What is
Sheldon was Vanna
doing?
White for me. They're just putting queen cups on and prepping it. It's a little out of order, but because we're doing things, you got to prep beforehand. And so there's a lot of material that you prep beforehand that you teach them during the class, and you tell them to do that beforehand. But you're cramming it in a short course, so it's the information. And I think a lot of them realized how difficult of a task that the grafting is. Some of them actually did really well, and some had a difficult time. I think they were getting a little cross-eyed at some point. These are actually some of our students practicing too. It was fun. There's Courtney. She's definitely looking a little cross-eyed after it.
I haven't grafted queens in years. I wonder if my eyes would do as well as they did when I was, like 25.
It really is a big difference. I had some trouble too. I feel like my eyes were wandering a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I've got more OTS.
Really, because for you, it's easier than the grafting.
Right. I've tried it a couple times, and I just that fine a detail just isn't there for me.
It's so small. Yeah. Sometimes, you can't tell if you flip the larva. And so that's what you kind of, you're worried that you flip the larva to a point where it's just not going to survive. So you've gone through all that trouble, and it's just not going to work.
So I've got a question. So on my queen rearing calendar verse, so the grafting calendar says what between days 7, 8, and 9 are the delicate wing stages, and not to move the cells, where like the OTS system on day 7, right in the middle of that is the day that they make the splits. So do you have any comments on that?
I think you just have to be very careful at how you're incorporating the cells into those splits, because if I think you can move those cells very, without damaging the bees or without disrupting the cell. There are some of those queen cage apparatuses are really, really interesting. That there's a few of those queen cage, queen cell cages that have the pegs that you can put in. And so I think there's ways that you can kind of keep the split and insert the cell without damaging them too much. You could, if you are worried though, a lot of times, in that grafting class, we talk about if you want to do 100 cells, you go for 250, so if there's a concern that there might be some physical damage, you could, try to put 2 cells in and let them out.
That's how I always did it. It was quantity over quality. So I didn't worry too much about flipping a larvae or anything, because I was like, well, if I do 100 of these, maybe we'll get 50.
Yeah, it's about quality. Yeah, quantity for sure.
Yeah.
We did have some. We had some students that actually got, I think the best was 8 out of 10. And there was another one that with a 7 out of 10. And then several with, 1 or 2. But yeah, it was good.
So the students came back how many days later?
Oh. No, we put them in cell builders and then took photos. When we're taking them out of, we do the closed cell system. So this is the closed cell system that Marla teaches, and Gary up in Minnesota is basically you're using a starter box. So you're artificially for that first 24 hours after you graft, you're putting them kind of in a swarm box with a lot of young bees and a lot of pollen, stimulating the cell start. So when we take them out after 24 hours, we're just taking photos and then putting them into their finishing colony, or the large, strong cell builder colony. So it just gives us an opportunity to take a photo and see how the grafting success was.
Right. So for those that aren't already familiar with grafting, can you give like a quick description of the grafting process in terms of the, the cells and the.
Sure. I guess for those who aren't familiar with it, basically, honeybees are are diploid haploid organisms, meaning that the females have two sets of chromosomes for mom and dad. And so really there's no difference between a worker and a queen, except for what she's fed at a very critical stage in her development. And that critical food is what stimulates their ovaries to start to develop. So that's what we do, is we basically take a 1-day-old larva, basically 12 hours to 24 hours after it's first emerged out of the egg, and you put it into this grafted cup, or this inverted plastic artificial cup, simulating the start of a queen cup. And basically you're tricking these bees to feed that larva to produce queen bees, feed it royal jelly, and that will start her development into a reproductive individual. That's it. I mean, we're just tricking the bees to make more queen cells, just like Andy is making the colonies super condensed into a swarming, dense situation. That's exactly what we do with the cell builders and the starter colonies. Is we're manipulating the age of the bees and the queenlessness of the bees, so that they recognize that they don't have a queen and they want to create queens. And we're basically stimulating their growth. And then we use these queen cells to replace queens, or to replace or expand our own operation. So we are not teaching people how to breed quality queens. This is just about replacements and how to maintain like queen banks, so that you can kind of replace them as you need, because the quality of queens and quality of colonies are hit and miss sometimes out here.
And so you get these little plastic cells that mimic the size of a queen cell. And then you take a little scooper that looks like the scraper at the dentist, and you go and you take a frame that's got a bunch of open brood on it and a bunch of young, the youngest larvae possible, like 2 or 3 day old, barely crescent moon larvae, and you scoop them out and you put them in there. I always put them in there with a little squirt of royal jelly already. I don't know if that's commonly used.
That's the wet graft versus the dry graft system.
Yeah. So I would do the wet grafting, and then you put all those cells into that weird frame that we just saw in that photo, and you put them into that colony that's all full of very young bees, so nurse bees, and then they will rear up for the first few days those new queens before you would move it to a finishing colony. Around what day do you move it to the finishing colony?
Well, we only have it in that starter colony for 24-hour period.
Just for 24 hours. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, here I can show you a slide of what that little we use the little Chinese grafting tool. I don't use the metal pick.
Oh, what's the Chinese grafting tool?
It's the one with the plunger. It's got the really thin piece of it's like a piece of a bone or something, I don't know, keratin nail or something, and then you scoop it, and then you've got this little plunger that kind of pushes it off.
I've seen those, but I think I tried it and I couldn't get it. Anyway.
I think it's just like the hive tool, and the J tool. It's like, yeah, see, Luke's showing it right now.
I have it right here, but it has like this little, almost like this little cup here that's really bendable.
Yeah.
And that's where it's difficult, as I've learned, is like you almost, like when you're putting it into the cell, you're almost putting it down to where like it bends a little bit, and then you're twisting it. So it's really just very tedious, because it's just really using fine motor skills.
Yeah, and then sometimes you can you have these little cages to protect them and stuff.
So cool.
You can put them right into the colonies, or you can you can make them and bank them.
So cool.
We have a tendency to flick them with those tools, but like
Just go flying.
that's one thing you learn from the queen rearing class is that you just gotta get comfortable with losing a few, because a few will roll, a few will disappear, a few just go under, or you grafted them, you picked them up, but they just somehow have jumped off your tool.
Yeah, the first few times I tried, I remember just accidentally squishing them, and so yeah, just having to start over. So it's you have to not be afraid that you're going to accidentally just kill a few of them, but it's definitely a learning technique.
Well, and whenever you're choosing a frame that's full of open, uncapped brood with really young larvae in it, I'm very much like a hard frame shaker. I'm not too worried, but with these, you want to treat them really delicately, right? You might want to get like a bee brush or something like that you don't want to shake them up too much because you don't want to damage them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there other folks out here that are queen rearing, queen breeding in the area, or interested in developing more of this?
Judy, I do a lot of cream rearing, but it's in western Kansas, so making a connection with everybody else is kind of hard to do.
What are your thoughts about getting more locally adapted stock in the area as a queen rearer?
I think it's difficult because in the teaching of everyone, they're taught that we have to have the package bee or the nuke, and it has to be real early in the spring and so forth. And so really my cells aren't ready when they are. We have a lag of about 4 weeks or so. And so it's difficult for the new person who's heard all these things about start really early to wait that long to get what would be a local queen. That's our biggest drawback right now.
Yeah, and I think a lot of for Washington State University, Steve Shepard and their group, they do a lot of importation of semen from old world countries to kind of rejuvenate the genetic pool in our old bees, and they've been kind of breeding bees for a very long time as well, and they've in colder climates, it's hard to get the bees to start, and so what they've done a lot is actually they're breeding bees for fall replacement, and then what is overwintered is what's available for commercial sale. So it does allow them to kind of allow them a little bit earlier distribution of packages and nukes, but they are replacing heavily in the fall and then only selling the ones that overwinter. And so they're not like brand new queens. They're overwintered queens.
That's something we're looking at now for the local ones. We used to do all this in Texas and bring them up, which wasn't any problem. But now that I'm retired, I'm just having fun with queens, and so that's something we're looking at is perhaps doing this so that they're fall queens and then pick them in the springtime.
Yeah. Let me know how that works out.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, in my area, my bees aren't living, so.
We have some trouble like that too. So has anybody ever grafted with the old toothpick style graft?
That's the metal picks that a little bit that it looks like a dental tool.
Yeah, that's the one I've done. That's the only way I've done it. Yeah.
When we started, we started actually. It was a toothpick style, and we carved it ourselves. We had an old, of course, that gives away my age here, but about 40 years ago, and we were having trouble with the metal one slipping off, and we went to his place and showed him the hive tool, or showed him the grafting tool, and he looked the thing over and he just threw it in the wastebasket. Cut out this long toothpick that they had made, and he started carving the whole thing into a little cup and taught us how to do that. And my goodness, we grafted easily with that. I still graft with a handmade tool. But
let's see it. Can you put it up to the camera?
Well, I think I can here. Let's see if you can get it in there and my fingers out of the way, but you got it anywhere there? It's coming into view. But
wow.
that's the old one. I
make these?
fired off So, but yeah, it's a matter of working with it and getting it wet and that type of thing, and then it's ready to go. But unfortunately, I've used the Chinese hive tool, but it's back to the thing, like you say, with the two hive tools. I'm used to this, and I can graft much faster with this one. So, but those are getting kind of scarce. Not too many people left to do that.
I could see that. I like the idea of using a wood pick because then you have a lot more grip then, you know? Yeah.
Here's the metal grafting tool, the German.
That's the dental one, right?
Yeah, that's what you were talking about. I don't see myself if you guys can see it or not.
No,
You
I
gotta
can
move
see
it closer to the camera, I think. There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
That's the one you like to use, Randall?
That's the one that I learned to use. I couldn't figure out the Chinese one, so that one worked better for me.
So are you
Yeah,
picking it
this one's
up at
actually
the
got
seam?
two ends. It's got the end with the spoon, and then it's got another end with the spoon, but it's got a extra kink in it.
For you to like kind of rest it against your finger, I think.
I suppose, yeah, probably.
Yeah. That's you get it under there and then you kind of turn. Yeah. I mean, it's been a while.
Twist at the end. It's all about the twist at the end.
Yeah. I tried the metal ones and I wasn't doing very well with them at all. I did seem to kind of like the Chinese ones just because they're more flexible and I felt like I was doing a better job with it. But yeah, I felt like with the workshop that we're doing when I was helping some of the participants, that's the one thing that I think really seemed to help them is that little twist at the end to be able to get the larva on that little cup.
Yeah, I mean, queen rearing is one of those things where you can read about the content of it, but it's still easier to do when you've got other people in the room to give you those little, twist your wrist a little bit and get against the side of the cell. You know, you can't help them if you can't see what they're doing. Yeah. But it was fun. We're excited to have in-person classes again.
That's so the commercial guys I work for, they don't really rear their own queens anymore. But this time of year when they're waiting for the honey supers to fill up, it's a little bit slower. He tried grafting last year and it didn't go so well. So this year he got the NICOT system. I haven't heard back from him. That's the kids are home for summer breaks, so I haven't been working for him here since the kids got home. But he tried the NICOT system this year.
Yeah, we've got a lot of beekeepers that just come out of the almond pollination, and they are just so strong and they are just so big that they don't need to kind of rear queens because they're just splitting, and they've got enough of a population of drones and of queen cells, to make really well-mated queens and just go on really fine. Like there's a lot of beekeepers from the western side of Nebraska that are coming from almond pollination. So they can actually start their beekeeping way earlier than we can because they've got a lot of commercial beekeepers coming back. They've got drones, they've got splits, they've got strong populations, and then we have to wait another 3 weeks before we get our colonies going. I mean, they're coming back in February, so they're going, right after. And we've got to wait till the end of March to get our bees warmed up and going. There's an advantage there for the commercial guys to not have to rear queens. They've already got that, that boom from the almond pollination.
I missed that.
I like the idea of that's what a lot of beekeepers are doing now is as they're incorporating their treatments with their splits and forcing those brood breaks and making those mites go into the phoretic stage where they can hit them a little bit more effectively with those treatments, just timing it with your replacements, timing it with your splits.
I have a question, like not to completely change gears, but I have a question. How is the honey flow in Nebraska right now? Because here in Iowa, it is not as good as it was last year. And I don't know.
Agree.
Andy, are you in the same boat?
Yeah, I agree completely. I see on Facebook, there's people saying that they're getting super filled up, but I'm not seeing it. It's nothing like last year right now.
No, it's not. And we the people I've talked to P&P honey supply say that like are really excited. They're getting their supers filled, and they're north of where I am, and they're north of where you are too. And I'm like, really?
Right.
Shouldn't it be hitting us first? What's the deal? I don't know what it's
Right.
like. I wonder what it's like in Nebraska. Is it the same? Is it similar? Are you guys getting honey?
It seems like it's not as quite as good as it was last year, but we are getting honey. I think that really is just, you know, I think just the amount of rain and moisture that we're getting. We did have a few good rains recently, but you know, it does seem like the drier it is, you know, there's just, I think there's just not as much nectar for them to forage on.
We had some really strong sweet clover pretty early, and then it kind of died out. I thought it was going to keep going, but I don't know. It kind of got wet, and then it came up, and then it got really hot and dry. So I don't know if we're going to get another one, but the sweet clover came on early, and I was like, "Ooh, it's going to be a good honey year," and then it just kind of fizzled out.
Yeah,
I still see it. But it's hard to say.
I was gonna say there's clover everywhere right now in Iowa, and for some reason I'm just like, what? Although I have to say, at our this week or this coming week, we also have hives out at agricultural sites where there's prairie strips present. So there's prairie strips interplanted within the crops, because we're hoping to maybe market prairie strip honey as like a honey that's sourced from a sustainable land practice. And those hives seem to be doing a lot better than my honey apiary hives that are out at one of our research farms. So maybe it has to do with site location. I'm not sure. But yeah, I'll have to report back at the end of July. Yeah, our next one's going to be end of July. It's going to be close to honey super pulling time. So it'll be, first week of August. So I guess we'll see. This is go time for honey production. Anyone else have reports on where they are and whether or not they've got a good honey flow or a poor honey flow?
Randall, Patrick posted in the chat. He said Northeast Kansas area has been up and down. Colonies have been backfilling brood boxes instead of supers. And then Cindy said ours too. Yeah, us in the lab, we've also been seen where they have been backfilling some of the brood chambers, and for that we've been extracting some of the deeps. That way we have more empty drawn comb to give them.
Southeast Michigan has been very good. Michigan seems like they've got it together. They can put formic acid on in the summertime.
The grass is always greener, Randall. The grass is always greener.
How hot does it get in Michigan during the summer?
Yeah, Galaxy Note 10. Does it get really hot there?
Oh, it will get up to 100 a couple days, but usually in the 90s is the high part.
Well, so my colleagues at Michigan State said, when I was talking to them about mite control, they said, "Oh yeah, but then you put formic acid on in July, don't you?" And I was like, "We could never." So I don't. Maybe they're in a different part of Michigan where it's a little bit cooler, even.
Well, we get breaks. Depends on the weather. I was putting bottom boards on so I can put formic on next week because there's going to be about a 5-day where the highs are going to be just 80. This past, like Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of this week, it's going to be again in the mid 80s at the max. So it's probably going to be 80 or 82. I just didn't have a chance to get the solid bottom boards on because I always like to put solid bottom boards on before I put the formic on, because that research showed it's 5 to 10% more effective with solid bottom boards.
Yeah, because it stays in there, I guess, for the vapor.
Yeah,
Cool.
I guess that's another point of my system is I'm hoping I do a few extra frames that go into mating nukes. That's so I can treat with formic now, and I've got extra queens if something goes bad. Because I mean, you can treat them and take care of the mites. You're just not treating because you're worried about your queen. She's disposable. We can make more queens.
Has anyone really had trouble? I've never had a queen die with formic, if you follow the label.
But
Judy,
see, that's the thing. I think the label says it needs to be lower than 92 the first 3 days. And that's why Randall, I'm assuming why Randall hasn't been doing it. I
think
do it anyway. And I have seen losses, but
Big
it's
ones.
usually the older queens.
well, and Judy, you've shown photos on here before, right? Of people that have just burned their hives because it looked like it was going to be, the temperature was going to be okay, and then it got really hot.
Yeah, I think the difference here is because, you know, and I know this because I grew up in California, but when you live near a large body of water, you tend to realize that the weather seems to come in increments. They don't have these massive 30-degree swings. So there's a buffering with the large bodies of water where you're prepared. Your weather is pretty consistent, and you can kind of plan. Out here, we don't trust the weather people because there's 20, 30 degrees and you put a treatment on and 2 days later it's completely different from what they forecasted, you know, the day before. And that's the problem with Formic, is that you plan the 10-day weather forecast, but it doesn't work out here. There's no buffering of the weather system.
I don't think anyone trusts the weather forecast.
Yeah, we have
True.
weather in Nebraska. We don't have climate.
Yeah, so the burnt, well, I have seen in here that there was a few beekeepers that had their entire yard just completely just kind of, you know, a lot of queen losses, a lot of brood damage. They originally thought it was a pesticide spray, and that could have been contributing to that, but certainly the formic acid treatment at the same time was just way too much for those colonies.
But again, that's because it exceeded the temperature restrictions, correct?
Yeah, but when it was applied, it was you know, it was within those temperature ranges, but sometimes you get the spikes in heat which you can't control.
And someone mentioned 92. I believe that's the old label. I think the new label wants to be 85 or less.
Yeah,
Um,
lower. I think it's lower. I don't know.
And
the
did you
exact
have
yeah,
it there?
no, I've got it right here. I've got it right here. It's where'd it go?
Sorry, that's my cell phone.
I was just reading the format. I think it's on the-
85 the day of application and not above 92 the first 3 days.
Yeah.
There
So
you
it's
go.
just 85 the day of application and 92 the first 3 days and no
I
rain.
also think that part of the problem with this one beekeeper was that they treated when their colonies were still in one deep, and so they were quite small. So
Oh.
that also.
Well, and that's what I'm thinking with the honey supers on, they've got somewhere to retreat to if it's too strong in the brood chamber.
Yeah.
Well, and you don't have to put 2 strips on. They also have a
Right,
method of
that's- I
doing
just did
strip
one.
at a time.
Yep.
So maybe that would be a
Yeah,
good
'cause-
compromise.
Because Randy Oliver wrote about it last winter in the American Bee Journal, and I can't remember exactly how he put it, but what I gleaned from it was that basically it burned off so fast that it seemed like there was no point in doing the 2-pad treatment and having it all burn off right away. Do the 1 pad and then the next pad 10 days later, so that it's not as strong, and even if it all burns off on the first pad, maybe you'll get a good dose on the second pad.
And that would just be a longer treatment window as well. Yeah.
Right.
One trick that I do is I'll put it in towards the evening. So when the first time it's going to evaporate, it's going to be at the evening temperature, and overnight it doesn't gas off as bad as if you're putting it in like at 10 in the morning and you got that afternoon heat that's going to just fry everything. I think that helps as well. Those little nuances makes your life a little better, I think.
That's a good tip. Yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful. I like this.
We do have a question in the chat. Cindy asked, "How do you deal with my hive that is backfilling but don't have extra drawn out frames? Should I try to put an empty frame in the middle of their hive?"
Right. And I also got an email like this from someone who I don't think who maybe was able to make it today. It's a similar situation where basically the colony is becoming what we call honeybound, where the bees are coming and they're filling in every open cell with nectar and not leaving any space for the queen to lay. When this starts happening with my colonies, I'll usually I want the honey supers on, so then hopefully they will start filling the honey frames with nectar as opposed to having it down in the brood nest. Well, those of us that have a lot of colonies luckily have the ability to maybe remove a honey frame and put an empty frame in to replace it, just to give them some more space and give the queen some more room to lay. But what would the suggestion be if you don't have any more drawn frames? If you have just a couple colonies, would the suggestion be to put in, an empty, undrawn foundation frame?
I wouldn't recommend that, especially if you break up the brood. An easier solution is just spin out the extra honey, put the wet supers back in, and guess what? They'll clean it up and she can lay again. If they're pollen bound, that's a different problem. So whoever submitted that question, are we talking honey bound or pollen bound?
I believe it's honey bound. They have a lot of nectar filled comb in there, but it's amongst the small amount of brood that's in there. So I'm just not sure what I need to do.
If you spin out your honey, they'll be tickled pink to clean out what's wet in those frames, and that queen can lay eggs right in there, and I'll take care of your problem.
But so how do you stimulate? So for example, if you find yourself in this situation, you're a new beekeeper and all of your honey frames are undrawn foundation, how do you stimulate the bees to draw out the comb in the undrawn foundation without becoming more honey bound? In the email that I received earlier, they said that it was recommended to them that they feed the bees so that it stimulates them to draw out the comb in the undrawn honey frames. But that doesn't sound right to me.
Yeah, you won't. They won't draw out comb if
they'll just fill all the cells with what you're feeding them.
Yeah.
You wouldn't
If you want the
feed them while
bees
you're
to draw out comb, you can artificially make them into a swarm and then put them back and then hive them back. But honestly, how many of you guys actually, will collect feral colonies or swarms out there? That's where you need to start throwing in foundation frames, having them draw out that little comb just a little bit and then stockpile that, because that's when you pull that stuff out for rainy days. Is you start hiving your swarms on foundation, let them draw out your comb a little bit and then put them into a box and then save that for later. But yes, you're not going to get colonies that are established during honey flow to build comb. You might as well just pull any of the foundation and they're still in there. It's not drawn.
Yeah, I was going to suggest
they'll be honey bound too. Sorry, Luke. Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. I was going to suggest to Cindy to maybe check with beekeepers around her to see if she could borrow or rent a honey extractor, and then taking the deep frames that are filled with honey and capped and extracting those. And then if she needs to, maybe just putting frames of foundation in their space in the meantime, and then swapping them back out when she gets them extracted. And then when she has empty drawn comb, to put that near the brood box or the brood where the brood's at for the queen to lay.
Mm-hmm. And if there's no drawn super, they're not going to go in the super either. It does have to be drawn comb.
We have in the lab been applying melted wax to the foundation to really help encourage them to draw it out. But this getting later in the season, it is less likely that they'll actually draw out comb.
What we also tell them to do is when they put back those wet supers, bring a frame of brood up to the next box and put empties around it, and then put some feed on top so that they can draw out. You can artificially cause them to draw out by having them think that there's a nectar flow by feeding them excess syrup. And with the brood, both the top and bottom, the heat from below will help keep the brood above warm. You sort of make like a pyramid shape. And then those bees will draw out some wax for you. Sorry about the phone call.
Well, that's okay. I was going to mention, if you do have I don't think you'd want to have the honey supers on if you are feeding, because then they would be putting sugar syrup in your honey super. So something you could do to just differentiate the two is, like Sheldon in the lab suggested, adding just a little bit of food dye. And then that way, in fact, if it is sugar syrup rather than honey, if you do have, something like that, just to make sure. But yeah, just be aware of, you don't want sugar syrup in your honey supers.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sometimes reversals work as well. It depends on what you have in your boxes. So if your top box is full of food or brood that is starting to get, smaller and smaller and condensed, but your bottom box has a lot of young brood still, or a lot of young eggs and larvae, sometimes I'll do a partial reversal. So you're bringing the brood, the young stuff, right to the edge of the bottom of the super. And that's pretty much occupying that space so that they can't honey fill it. But basically they have to go up and over that brood to fill the supers. And that's one way to encourage them to get into the supers. But if they're already starting to backfill that honey into your colony, you have to be very careful that you're not putting a brood frame with a 2-inch honey seal at the top, because that's just as much as of a honey sealing as, as not having honey. So it really is brood frame all the way to the wood bar right under the super in order to encourage them to go up and over. And that would be just a partial reversal. Sometimes you can do a full reversal, but it depends on how much brood you have and how much food you have.
So I see what you're saying. Normally on your frame, you would have the brood in the middle and the honey around. And then maybe.
And then they
the
start to
box
backfill
underneath.
it. They're starting to increase that honey downward. Now your
Yeah.
brood is tiny.
So if you go underneath it and you take a frame that is more just almost all completely brood without that honey frame around it, and you bring that to the top box and then put your honey super on top of that, it's not like there's a wall of honey telling them to stop. They'll keep
Right.
going up. Yes. Okay.
Yep. They want to put food above their brood cluster. And so you're basically manipulating the brood cluster. So now they're not back filling it, but they're going up into your supers. Yeah. But that's certainly something you want to do kind of earlier on in the mid season, like in the early summer. Because right now, if you're honey bound, it's a little bit tough to find any frames without, honey all around.
Yeah, you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place.
That's where you break out the extractor.
Mm-hmm. Because there's generally like that honey band on those frames, and if it's all the way across the second deep, it'll create a honey ceiling to where it's hard for the bees to go up to fill the supers with honey. Cindy, how many supers do you have on your hive? Just one?
Just one on that one.
Okay. I was going to say, another thing that we've been doing in the lab is bottom supering. And so we'll put the next super underneath the one that they were working on recently. And so we'll put the bottoms for bottom supering, we'll put it above the queen excluder underneath the super that they're working.
Well, I think it's about that time. It's 6 o'clock. So I guess we will respect people's time, and everyone can go out and have a good, hopefully long weekend. Hopefully most people have Monday off, can enjoy the 4th of July. So thank you everybody for coming. Feel free to email me or Judy or Luke any extra questions you have, or if there's anything that you want us to bring up at our next meeting. And thank you for coming. This is always fun. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a
Thank
nice
you.
weekend.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.